The first time she said those words to me, rain was falling so softly that it felt like the world was holding its breath. "You are so young. I am older than you." At that moment, I did not know how deeply those words would shape my life, or how much I would fight to prove that love does not follow the rules people try to force on it. I remember sitting in my old car at the edge of the village, the engine still running, my hands resting on the steering wheel. The rain tapped gently against the roof, steady and calm. I was not nervous, not exactly. My heart was racing for a reason I could not explain yet. I had come to see a woman I had never met but whose name carried weight in my family. Grace. She was the woman who had saved my sister Lily years ago after a bad accident. Lily never forgot her kindness, and neither did I. The house stood quietly in front of me, small and wooden, with a narrow porch and steps worn smooth by time. It looked warm, like it held stories inside its walls. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and felt the cool rain soak into my jacket as I walked up to the porch. My fingers shook slightly when I knocked on the door. When it opened, the first thing I noticed was her eyes. Blue, calm, and kind in a way that made everything feel softer. She looked at me with gentle curiosity. She wore a simple blue blouse and a denim skirt, her blonde hair tied loosely, a few strands falling around her face. Standing beside her was a little girl, no more than 5, holding onto her leg as if the world was too big to face alone. I forgot what I had planned to say. My words came out awkward and rushed. I told her my name. I told her about Lily. I told her I was only there to say thank you. Her face lit up with recognition, and she smiled in a way that felt honest and warm. She asked about my sister, and when I told her Lily was happy, married and living in the city, her smile grew softer. She said some things are done simply because they are right. Then she introduced me to her daughter, Emily. The little girl peeked at me with wide eyes, then hid, again, shy but curious. I crouched down and said hello, and for just a second she smiled back. That smile stayed with me longer than I expected. What was meant to be a short visit turned into tea at her kitchen table. The rain faded into the background as hours passed without me noticing. We talked about simple things. Life in small towns. Quiet evenings. Loneliness that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. She told me her husband had left 3 years earlier, unable to carry the weight of being a father. Since then, she had been raising Emily alone, working part-time at a bakery, holding her world together with tired hands and a strong heart. I told her about myself too. I was 26, an engineer who had recently moved back after losing my job in the city. I did not dress it up. I told her I was starting over, unsure of my direction, trying to rebuild something that felt like purpose. She listened without judgment, without pity. Just listened. That alone meant more to me than I could admit. I started coming by more often after that day. At first I told myself it was just a help, fixing a loose step on the porch, repairing a leaky sink, driving Emily to school when Grace had early shifts. But slowly, without asking permission, they became part of my routine. Evenings on the porch, quiet conversations, Emily laughing when I brought her small toys or silly drawings. Weeks passed, then months. I did not notice when admiration turned into something deeper. I only knew that I waited for Grace's smile, that the house felt empty on days I did not visit, that watching her with Emily filled a space in my chest I did not know was missing. Grace noticed it too. I could see it in the way she sometimes pulled back, in the pauses between her words. She had walls built from pain and fear, and she guarded them carefully. Still, something was changing between us, whether she wanted it or not. One evening, we sat in the garden behind the house as the sun dipped low. Emily had fallen asleep in Grace's lap, her small hand resting against her arm. I watched them, the light wrapping around them like something sacred. My chest felt tight. My heart would not stay quiet anymore. I took a breath, knowing once I spoke, nothing would be the same. Grace looked at me, sensing it, and before I could stop myself, I said her name. Grace looked at me when I said her name, really looked at me, like she already knew what was coming and was afraid to hear it out loud. The garden was quiet except for the soft sounds of the evening. Emily slept peacefully, unaware that the world around her was about to shift. I told Grace the truth. I told her I had fallen in love with her. I did not dress it up. I did not hide behind big words. I just said what my heart had been holding for weeks. When I finished, the air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. She did not speak right away. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away from me, toward the fading light. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and shaken. She told me I was too young. She told me she was older. She told me life had already taught her too many painful lessons. I told her love does not care about age. I told her she had shown me what real strength looked like, that she made me want to be better, not because I had to be, but because I wanted to be. I asked her if love was not supposed to feel like that. She shook her head slowly. She said people would talk, they would judge. She said she had already been hurt once and could not risk pulling me into her broken world. I could hear fear in her words, not rejection. That gave me hope. After that night, nothing was simple, but nothing ended either. Grace did not push me away completely. Instead, she built quiet distance, careful distance, and I respected it. I did not argue, I did not beg, I just kept showing up. I fixed the broken fence behind the house. I cooked dinner when she came home tired from work. I read Emily bedtime stories when Grace's eyes could barely stay open. I did not bring flowers or make promises. I brought consistency. I brought patience. Emily noticed first. She started running to the door when she heard my car. She asked when I would come over again. She drew pictures of the three of us without realizing what that meant. Watching her trust me made something inside Grace soften, even when she tried to hide it. One night, rain returned, just like the day we met. Grace stood in the doorway watching me struggle to cover the garden plants from the downpour. She stepped outside with an umbrella and came to stand beside me. For a moment we just stood there, rain falling around us. She called me stubborn. I smiled and told her I only fought for what mattered. That night, she kissed me. It was not perfect. It was unsure and emotional and full of tears, but it was real. And from that moment, there was no going back. Love did not make things easier. It made them harder in new ways. The town noticed. Whispers followed Grace in the market. People stared. Some smiled with curiosity. Others looked away with judgment. I could feel Grace pulling back again, doubt creeping into her heart. Some nights, she sat on the porch in silence, staring into nothing. One evening I came home to find her crying. She told me maybe this was a mistake. She told me I deserved someone my own age. Someone without baggage, someone simpler. I knelt in front of her and took her hands. I told her she had already given me everything. A home. A purpose. A family. I told her I did not care about the noise of the world. I only cared about her and Emily. She cried harder then, like something finally broke open. For the first time, she did not push me away. She leaned into me and let herself believe she was allowed to be happy. Time passed. Not in dramatic leaps, but in steady proof. I helped Emily learn to ride her bike. I fixed leaks and broken doors. I celebrated birthdays with small gifts and long hugs. I never changed the way I looked at Grace, even when others did. Slowly, the town changed too. They saw what was real. They saw love, not scandal. They saw a family forming, not a mistake. One quiet morning in spring, I stood in the garden holding a small box. Grace turned toward me, surprised. Emily stood nearby, eyes shining. I knelt down and told Grace that once she said I was too young. Maybe I was. But I had grown with her, and I could not imagine life without her and Emily. I asked her to marry me. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face, and whispered yes. After she said yes, nothing felt loud or dramatic. There was no cheering, no big moment that stopped time. Instead, there was a quiet peace that settled over us, like the world finally exhaled. Grace sat beside me in the garden, still holding my hand, still shaking a little. Emily wrapped her arms around us both, like she was afraid one of us might disappear if she let go. That night, After Emily fell asleep, Grace and I sat on the porch long after the sky turned dark. The air was cool, and the crickets filled the silence between our words. Grace finally spoke about the fears she had kept locked inside. She talked about the years she spent doubting herself, about the shame she felt when her marriage ended, about how the town's quiet judgment made her feel smaller every day. I listened. I did not interrupt. I did not try to fix it. I just stayed. When she finished, she rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time she did not pull away. Being engaged did not make the world kinder overnight. If anything, the whispers grew louder for a while. Some people smiled politely and said nothing. Others were bold enough to ask questions that were not their business. Grace tried to stay strong, but I could see how it wore on her. One afternoon, she came home from the market quiet and distant. Later that evening, she told me someone had asked if she was afraid of stealing my future. The words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. That night, doubt returned to her eyes. I reminded her of the life we were already living, of the mornings making breakfast together, of Emily running into my arms after school, of the way our home felt full instead of lonely. I told her my future was not something she took. It was something we built together. Emily played a bigger role than either of us expected. One night, she crawled into Grace's lap and asked if I would always live with them. Grace hesitated, then looked at me. Before she could answer, Emily smiled and said she liked it when we were all together because it felt safe. That word stayed with Grace. Safe. Planning the wedding was simple. No big hall. No long guest list. Just the people who mattered. Grace worried her age would stand out beside me. I told her I had never been prouder to stand next to someone. She slowly stopped seeing herself through the eyes of others and started seeing herself through mine. There were moments when old fears tried to return. Late at night. Quiet mornings. But every time, we talked. We chose honesty over silence. We chose each other again and again. The town began to soften. People noticed the consistency. They noticed how I showed up every day. They noticed how Emily thrived. Judgment faded into acceptance, then into quiet respect. On the morning of the wedding, Grace stood in front of the mirror, nervous and beautiful. She asked me one last time if I was sure. I told her I had never been more certain of anything in my life. Outside, under the old tree behind the house, everything waited. The same tree that had watched us grow from strangers into something unbreakable. As she walked toward me, I realized something simple and true. Love had not asked our ages. It had only asked if we were brave enough to choose it. And we were. The ceremony was small and quiet, just the way Grace wanted it. The old tree behind the house stood tall above us, its branches moving gently in the breeze. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, warm and soft, like it was blessing the moment. There were no fancy decorations, just simple chairs, wildflowers in glass jars, and the people who truly mattered. Emily stood beside Grace, holding her hand. She wore a little dress. She picked herself and smiled like she was carrying a secret she could not wait to share. When Grace reached me, her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from fear. They were from relief, from certainty. We said our vows without scripts, just honest words. Grace spoke about the years she spent believing love had passed her by, about learning to trust again, about finding hope where she never expected it. When it was my turn, my voice shook, but I did not stop. I told her she changed my life the moment she opened that door on a rainy day. I told her she made me feel like I belonged somewhere for the first time in a long while. When we finished, Emily stepped forward and placed her small hands over ours. She looked up at us and said that now we were really a family. Everyone laughed softly through tears. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not age, not judgment, not the past. Marriage did not turn life into a fairy tale. It turned it into something real. Mornings were busy. Evenings were quiet. Some days were hard. But they were ours. Grace stopped apologizing for who she was. She stopped shrinking herself to fit other people's comfort. She grew lighter, stronger, happier. The town fully changed too. People smiled openly now. Some even apologized for their silence before. Time had shown them what love looked like when it was steady and true. Years passed. Emily grew older. She stopped holding our hands everywhere, but she never stopped calling me family. Our house filled with memories. Laughter, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because we shared them. One evening, long after the sun set, Grace and I sat on the porch again, just like we used to. She leaned into me and smiled. She told me she was glad she had been wrong. That love really did not care about age. I held her hand and thought about how close we came to missing this life, how fear almost won, how choosing love changed everything. Somewhere inside me, I knew this story was never about age at all. It was about courage, about kindness, about two hearts brave enough to ignore the rules and listen to what felt true. And if there is one thing I have learned, it is this: love does not ask how old you are. It only asks if you are willing to stay.